There are songs that were on every radio, in every car, at every party. Songs your whole generation knew word for word. And somehow, somewhere along the way, they got left behind. They deserve to be found again. Here are 20 forgotten 60s and 70s songs everyone once knew by heart. Number 20, Hitching a Ride by Vanity Fair, 1970. Vanity Fair were a British pop group from Rochester, Kent, who had a string of modest UK hits in the late 1960s before Hitchin' a Ride crossed the Atlantic and gave them their biggest commercial moment. The song was written by Pete Callender and Mitch Murray, the same writing partnership responsible for Jerry and the Pacemakers' I Like It. And it has a specific quality of effortless forward momentum, like the act of putting out your thumb on a sunny day and having someone stop immediately. It reached number 5 on the Billboard Hot 100 in January 1970 and spent 16 weeks on the chart. In the United Kingdom, it had peaked at number 16. The American audience received it more warmly than the British one had, which is not unusual for British pop of the era. Vanity Fair did not repeat this commercial success in the United States and faded from mainstream visibility after the early 1970s. The song turns up on 1970 compilation albums regularly enough to confirm that people who remember it fondly. Number 19, Morning Has Broken by Cat Stevens, 1971.
Praise for the singing.
Morning Has Broken is a Christian hymn with words written by Eleanor Fargian in 1931, set to a traditional Gaelic melody called Boonessin. Cat Stevens, who had been recovering from tuberculosis and using the convalescence period to deepen his musical and spiritual interests, discovered the hymn and recorded it for his 1971 album, Teaser and the Firecat, with Rick Wakeman playing the piano part. Wakeman was paid a flat session fee for his playing and received no royalties.
Sweet the rain's new fall.
A standard arrangement at the time that he has noted with some rueful humor in interviews since, given how recognizable his piano part became. Stevens' recording reached number 6 on the Billboard Hot 100 in April 1972. Stevens converted to Islam in 1977, changed his name to Yusuf Islam, and withdrew from the music industry before returning to recording in the 2000s. Morning Has Broken has a specific nostalgic texture, morning light, a sense of beginning, that made it a recurring presence on Sunday radio broadcasts for years.
Sunlit from heaven.
Number 18, Billy Don't Be a Hero by Paper Lace, 1974.
Billy, don't be a hero, don't be a fool.
Paper Lace were a Nottingham band who recorded Billy Don't Be a Hero for the UK market in 1974, where it reached number 1. Bo Donaldson and the Haywoods recorded a competing American version and released it before Paper Lace's version arrived in the United States. Theirs reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in June 1974 and spent 2 weeks there. Paper Lace's own version reached number 96 in America. The song was written by Mitch Murray and Peter Callender, the same team behind Hitchin' a Ride, and tells the story of a woman watching her fiancé go off to war and not come back. The anti-war sentiment was direct and the melody irresistibly catchy, an unusual combination that gave the song a reach that more overtly political songs rarely achieved. Paper Lace subsequently scored UK hits with The Night Chicago Died and The Black-Eyed Boys before fading from the mainstream.
Be a hero, come back to me.
Number 17, Green Green Grass of Home by Tom Jones, 1966.
The green, green grass of home.
Tom Jones recorded Green Green Grass of Home in 1966, and it took it to number 1 in the United Kingdom. where it spent 7 weeks at the top. The song was written by Curly Putman and had been recorded previously by Porter Wagoner in 1965, but Jones's version became the definitive one internationally. In the United States, it reached number 11 on the Billboard Hot 100. The song is a dream narrative, a man returning home to familiar places and faces,
Hair of gold and lips like cherry.
then waking to discover he is in a prison cell awaiting execution. The structural reveal gives the warm, nostalgic verses a retrospective meaning that transforms what had seemed like straightforward homecoming into something darker. Jones's baritone gave the reveal a weight a lighter singer couldn't have delivered. The song sold over 1 million copies in the United Kingdom alone. Green, Green Grass of Home remains one of the most concentrated expressions of what Jones' voice could do with material that was worthy of it.
The green, green grass of home.
Number 16, Seasons in the Sun by Terry Jacks, 1974.
Goodbye to you, my trusted friend.
Seasons in the Sun was written by Belgian singer-songwriter Jacques Brel under the title Le Moribond in 1961 and was adapted into English by Rod McEwen, who had collaborated with Brel on translations of his work. The Christie Minstrels recorded an early English version. Terry Jacks, a Canadian musician who had been part of the Poppy family with his then-wife Susan Jacks, recorded the song in 1974 and had a massive international hit. It reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in March 1974 and spent 3 weeks there.
We had joy, we had fun, we had seasons in the sun.
It also reached number 1 in the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, and numerous other countries, making it one of the most globally successful songs of that year. The song is a farewell from a dying man to the people he loves, his father, his friend, his wife, and the specific way Jacks performed it, with a sincerity that sat just at the edge of sentiment without tipping over, gave it a quality that dismissed it at your own peril. Critics at the time were not particularly kind to it, but the sales figures made it one of the best-selling singles of the decade.
We climbed, we're just seasons out of time.
Number 15, Honey by Bobby Goldsboro, 1968.
And kinda smart, and I loved her so.
Bobby Goldsboro's Honey is one of those records that a certain generation experienced as genuinely moving, and that subsequent generations have encountered more as a subject of parody. Written by Bobby Russell, who also wrote Little Green Apples, it tells the story of a man recounting memories of his deceased wife. It reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in April 1968 and spent 5 weeks there. The song was re-released in 1975 and charted again. It sold over 4 million copies worldwide.
Kept me up all Christmas Eve 2 years ago.
Number 14, Tie a Yellow Ribbon Round the Old Oak Tree by Tony Orlando and Dawn, 1973. Tony Orlando and Dawn. Orlando, Joyce Vincent Wilson, and Thelma Hopkins recorded Tie a Yellow Ribbon Round the Old Oak Tree in 1973, and it became one of the most commercially successful singles of the decade. The song was written by Irwin Levine and L. Russell Brown and tells the story of a man returning home from prison on a bus, having written to his girlfriend to signal whether she still wanted him back by tying a yellow ribbon around the oak tree outside their home. He can't look. He asks the passengers to look for him. They look.
I'm coming home, I've done my time.
It reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in April 1973 and spent 3 weeks at the top. It reached number 1 in the United Kingdom, Australia, and across Europe. Tony Orlando has said in interviews that the recording session itself had an unusual energy. The musicians and the vocalists all felt during the recording that something was connecting in a way that doesn't always happen, and the response confirmed it. The song eventually sold over 3 million copies in the United States alone and contributed to the yellow ribbon becoming a symbol of welcome for returning loved ones in American culture more broadly. Number 13, Build Me Up Buttercup by the Foundations, 1968. The Foundations were a multiracial London group, including members from the Caribbean, Sri Lanka, and the United Kingdom, who had already scored a major hit with Baby Now That I've Found You, before recording Build Me Up Buttercup in 1968. The song was written by Tony McCauley and Mike DeBow, the latter of whom was the lead singer of Manfred Mann at the time. It is a song about being strung along by someone unreliable, waiting, being stood up, waiting again, delivered with such energy and good humor that the frustration it describes is transformed into pure joy. It reached number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100 in January 1969 and number 2 in the United Kingdom. The specific sound of the recording, the horns, the rhythm section, the call and response vocal, captures something about the energy of late 1960s pop that was simultaneously American and British in a way that didn't always happen. The Foundations did not have comparable subsequent success. The song appears in film and television soundtracks regularly enough to confirm that music supervisors know what it does to an audience. Buttercup, don't break my heart. Number 12, Love Grows, Where My Rosemary Goes, by Edison Lighthouse, 1970. Edison Lighthouse's Love Grows, Where My Rosemary Goes was one of the most unexpected number 1 singles of 1970. A song that came from nowhere commercially, dominated the British charts, and then faded almost as quickly as it had arrived. It was written by Tony McCauley and Barry Mason, produced by McCauley, and reached number 1 in the United Kingdom in January 1970, where it stayed for 5 weeks. In the United States, it reached number 5 on the Billboard Hot 100, a strong showing for a British act whose name most American listeners had never heard before and wouldn't hear again. There's something about a hand-holding mind. It's a feeling. The band that performed on the recording was largely a studio construct. A touring version of Edison Lighthouse was assembled after the fact with different personnel. The lead vocalist, Tony Burrows, had a career as a session singer that was remarkable in its range. He sang lead on Love Grows, In the Summertime by Mungo Jerry, the handclap part, United We Stand by Brotherhood of Man, and Gimme Dat Ding by the Pipkins, among others, all in the same general period. The song's effortless bounce gives it a warmth that has kept it alive on 1970s compilation albums across the decades. Number 11, Knock 3 Times by Tony Orlando and Dawn, 1970.
Knock 3 times on the ceiling if you want me.
Before Tie a Yellow Ribbon, Tony Orlando and Dawn had already scored a massive hit with Knock 3 Times in 1970. The song was written by Erwin Levine and L. Russell Brown and tells the story of a man communicating with the woman in the apartment below his by knocking through the floor and banging on the pipes. It is a piece of pure pop construction. The premise is immediately delightful, the chorus is impossible to resist, and the arrangement gives it forward momentum that does not let up for 2 minutes and 51 seconds.
If the answer is no.
It reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in January 1971 and spent 3 weeks at the top. It also reached number 1 in the United Kingdom. It sold over 3 million copies in the United States and was one of the top 5 best-selling singles of 1971. Tony Orlando has said the song's success surprised everyone involved. It was recorded quickly, the production was relatively simple, and nobody anticipated what it would become. it is a perfect example of a song that worked because everything about it was exactly right, without any single element being extraordinary.
Means you ain't gonna show.
Number 10, Incense and Peppermints by Strawberry Alarm Clock, 1967.
Good sense, innocence, crippling mankind.
Strawberry Alarm Clock were a psychedelic rock band from Los Angeles who had a #1 hit in 1967 with a song that was not written by the band, was not sung by the band's regular lead singer, and was not particularly representative of their own musical preferences. Incense and Peppermints was written by John Carter and Tim Gilbert, performed with lead vocals by Greg Munford, who was barely a member of the band, and reached #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in November 1967, spending 1 week there. The recording captures something about 1967 that no amount of deliberate period recreation has ever fully matched. The sound of a moment when the radio was full of things that wouldn't have been on it 3 years earlier. Strawberry Alarm Clock became essentially a one-hit wonder, though a well-remembered one.
Incense and peppermints, meaningless nouns.
Number 9, Cracklin' Rosie by Neil Diamond, 1970.
Cracklin' Rose, your store-bought woman.
Neil Diamond wrote Cracklin' Rosie and recorded it in 1970 for his Uni Records debut, and it reached #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in September of that year, spending 1 week at the top. Diamond has said the song was inspired by a story he heard about the Cree people of Canada, among whom men who couldn't find a partner at a gathering would sometimes buy a bottle of wine and spend the evening with it as company. Cracklin' Rosie was the wine. Diamond had spent the 1960s writing hits for other artists. I'm a Believer for the Monkees, Cherry Cherry as a performer himself. Cracklin' Rosie confirmed him as a performer capable of major commercial success in his own right. The recording has a specific road trip energy, something open and rolling, that has kept it on classic hits radio while many contemporaries faded.
Ain't nothing here that I care to take a...
Number 8, My Sweet Lord by George Harrison, 1970.
I really wanna see you.
George Harrison released My Sweet Lord as the lead single from his triple album All Things Must Pass in November 1970, and it became the first #1 solo single by a former Beatle on the Billboard Hot 100, reaching the top in December 1970 and spending 4 weeks there. In the United Kingdom, it reached #1 immediately upon release. Harrison wrote the song while on tour with Delaney and Bonnie in December 1969, inspired by the Edwin Hawkins singers' Oh Happy Day. He wanted to write a gospel song that moved through Christian and Hindu devotional content, the Hallelujah section giving way to the Hare Krishna chant.
Really wanna be with you.
The production by Phil Spector and Harrison used multiple guitars layered in Spector's wall of sound style, and the specific warmth of the recording, the way the backing vocals surround and support the lead, gives it a quality of communal worship that matches the subject matter. The song became the subject of a copyright infringement case brought by Bright Tunes Music, publisher of the Chiffons' He's So Fine, 1963. A 1976 court ruling found that Harrison had subconsciously plagiarized the melody. Harrison later wrote a song called This Song about the experience. The copyright dispute does not change what the recording is: one of the warmest and most genuinely felt devotional songs produced in that era.
Really wanna see you, Lord, but
Number 7, Gypsies, Tramps, and Thieves by Cher, 1971.
I was born in the wagon of a traveling show. My mama used to dance.
Cher recorded Gypsies, Tramps, and Thieves in 1971 for her Cap Records debut as a solo artist following the temporary end of the Sonny and Cher partnership. The song was written by Robert Stone and had been offered to several other artists before reaching Cher. The storyline: a young woman born into a traveling family, abandoned by successive men, raising the daughter of one of them, was unusually specific and narratively complete for a pop single. It reached #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in November 1971 and spent 2 weeks at the top. It was the first of 3 consecutive #1 singles on the Hot 100 for Cher as a solo artist in the early 1970s. The production, the specific arrangement with the orchestra, and Cher's voice sitting above it, has an almost cinematic quality, as though the 3.5 minutes of the song were the compressed version of something that could sustain a much longer telling. This recording from 1971 stands on its own terms, entirely separate from the decades of career that followed it. Number 6, The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down by Joan Baez, 1971. The band wrote and recorded The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down and released it on their second album in 1969. Robbie Robertson wrote it, and Levon Helm sang it. Helm, who was from Arkansas and the only American-born member of the group, gave the narrative of a Southern family experiencing the Civil War's end a specific authenticity that Robertson, a Canadian, could write but not perform. Joan Baez recorded her version in 1971 and released it as a single. Baez's version reached #3 on the Billboard Hot 100 in September 1971, making it the most commercially successful recorded version of the song. Her arrangement differed from the band's original. It was more produced, more orchestrated, and her voice brought a different quality to the material. The song itself, which deals with the experience of defeat and survival from the perspective of ordinary people rather than generals and politicians, had been noted from the time of its original recording as unusual in its historical empathy. Baez's version introduced the song to a much larger audience than the band's had reached, and for many listeners of the early 1970s, her recording was the one they knew first. Number 5, Spirit in the Sky by Norman Greenbaum, 1969. Norman Greenbaum wrote and recorded Spirit in the Sky in 1969 while living on a farm in Petaluma, California. He was Jewish, not Christian, and has explained in interviews that he wrote the song because he felt Christian rock was an underserved commercial niche, that the specific energetic rock and roll approach he was applying to devotional content had not been done in quite this way before. The song was recorded in a single session. It reached #3 on the Billboard Hot 100 in April 1970 and spent 18 weeks on the chart. In the United Kingdom, it reached #1.
Going on to the spirit in the sky.
The specific sound of the recording, the fuzz guitar, the gospel choir, the complete certainty of tone, is one of the more unusual combinations in chart history, and one that has proved almost impossible to date. It sounds like 1969 in terms of the guitar tone and production approach, but it also sounds like something timeless in the way that very few records do. It has been in near constant use in film and television soundtracks for 50 years. Greenbaum did not have a comparable subsequent hit. The song he wrote in one session on a Petaluma farm is the thing most people know about him. Number 4, You Light Up My Life by Debby Boone, 1977. Debby Boone recorded You Light Up My Life, written by Joe Brooks, for the 1977 film of the same name, and the single became one of the most commercially successful records of its decade. It spent 10 weeks at #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, making it the longest-running #1 single of the entire decade of the 1970s. It won the Academy Award for Best Original Song and the Grammy Award for Best New Artist for Boone. Debby Boone was the daughter of Pat Boone, giving her a family connection to one of the most commercially successful pop singers of the 1950s. Her own recording career beyond this single was modest, and the song has become associated in subsequent cultural reference primarily with its extraordinary chart run. 10 weeks, the longest of the decade, rather than with any particular artistic assessment. The production is entirely of its era, clean, orchestrated, earnest. Whatever one thinks of the aesthetic, the numbers are historical facts. Number 3, Alone Again, Naturally, by Gilbert O'Sullivan, 1972.
Alone again, naturally.
Gilbert O'Sullivan was a Waterford-born, Swindon-raised singer-songwriter who had been signed to MAM Records under manager Gordon Mills, the same manager who handled Tom Jones and Engelbert Humperdinck, and had been developing a deliberately quirky public image that included a flat cap and short trousers, referencing early 20th century working-class British fashion. Alone Again, Naturally, was different in tone from his other work. The song deals with the narrator's contemplation of suicide following being stood up at the altar, and then reflects on the death of his father and the anticipated death of his mother. It is unusually dark subject matter for a song that reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100, where it spent 6 weeks in the summer of 1972, and the melody and production were gentle enough that many listeners absorbed the warmth of the recording without fully registering what the lyric was doing. O'Sullivan delivered it with such complete emotional conviction that the song's sadness reads more as cathartic than disturbing. It was the best-selling single of 1972 in the United States. O'Sullivan had several subsequent hits in the United Kingdom and in the United States, though none matched Alone Again commercially.
Alone again, naturally.
Number 2, Don't Give Up on Us, by David Soul, 1977.
Don't give up on us, baby.
David Soul, best known to American television audiences as Kenneth Hutchinson in Starsky and Hutch, which ran from 1975 to 1979, had a parallel recording career in the United Kingdom that produced commercial results that his American audience was largely unaware of. Don't Give Up on Us was written by Tony Macaulay and reached number 1 in the United Kingdom in January 1977, spending 4 weeks there and eventually selling over 1 million copies in the UK alone. In the United States, it reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in May 1977, spending 1 week at the top. The song is a ballad about a couple on the verge of separation. Soul's warm, slightly husky baritone suits the material completely, and the production gives it emotional weight without tipping into melodrama. The song stands up on its own terms, separate from the celebrity context.
We can still come through.
Number 1, Afternoon Delight by Starland Vocal Band, 1976. Vocal Band were a Washington, D.C. group. Bill Danoff, Taffy Nivert, John Carroll, and Margot Chapman. And Bill Danoff had already co-written Take Me Home, Country Roads with John Denver and Taffy Nivert in 1971. Afternoon Delight was written by Danoff and recorded in 1976, and it reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in July of that year, spending 2 weeks at the top. The song won the Grammy Award for Best New Artist in 1977 and the Grammy for Best Arrangement for Voices. The title and lyric deal with the pleasures of a midday romantic rendezvous, rendered in language that is cheerful enough to have been played on daytime radio throughout the summer of 1976 without apparent controversy. Subsequent decades have been slightly more analytical about the specific subject matter, which is what Danoff actually described. But the recording's commercial success in its original context was entirely genuine, and the harmonies the 4 vocalists built remain one of the more impressive examples of vocal arrangement in the genre. The Starland vocal band did not have a comparable subsequent hit. The conjunction of the 2 Grammys and the single success represented a peak that most recording artists would be grateful to have reached. If any of these just came back to you, hit the like button and subscribe. There are more lists like this one waiting.